Okay, everybody, I have 8:30, so I think we're going to honor your time today and get started. My name is Jen Collins, and on behalf of our statewide MTSS team, who is here in full force today, we want to say welcome. This is for those of you who might be joining from outside of our team-based series. This is the first day, the first kickoff to our secondary ELA series. And most of the content is being led and directly facilitated by Dr. Laina Santoro, who we'll introduce momentarily. Just to give you some context for this series, through the MTSS initiative, what we do in terms of training and technical assistance is we have been steeped in launching these year-long series, and they each have different foci. So in this case, we're focused on enhancing enhancing secondary literacy outcomes, primarily through this series, with an emphasis on writing. And then in our other series, we have different emphases. This series in particular was one of the first that we developed. And so I think we might be in our 6th or 7th year. And previously, Laina worked very closely with William Van Cleve. And I say that because for those of you who don't know, William Van Cleve passed away quite unexpectedly about 7 months ago. And so I say that because we want to honor everything that he contributed to this series, and secondly, because I'd really like today to be a tribute to him, and I know I'm joined in those thoughts and feelings by my colleagues. So here's to you, William. We know you're with us here today, and we know that Laina is going to do a great job. So what I have, hopefully you can see, is our secondary MTSS and PA logo. And for those of you who are joining from the Job Alike group, the Job Alike ELA group in the Middle High series, you've seen this, hopefully. For those of you who are just joining today from the secondary ELA series, grades 5 through 9, this might be new. And what we want to point out here is that when we're scaling secondary practices, and in this case, reading and writing practices to the middle and high level, we're talking, as we are about elementary, we're talking about an emphasis on an integrated approach to reading and writing. Often as kids matriculate to the secondary level, comprehensive literacy instruction is not so comprehensive. It becomes less comprehensive and less integrated over time. So we're hoping that the PD that we'll be offering through this series and through Laina Santoro will be helpful to you as we reconnect with best practices in integrated literacy instruction at all levels, notwithstanding the secondary level. What you'll also notice about this graphic is that we're sort of demarcating between what we do with all kids at the secondary level and what we do with a few kids. And when we look at this red area, the very top of the triangle, we are talking, and we'll talk about it through this series, we're talking about kids who are sitting up here, who are most vulnerable, meaning that these are kids who often lack the minimum basic skills to access core content instruction with relative ease and efficiency. So these are often kids, by virtue of how they perform on the PSSA and the Keystones, these are often kids who are falling 2 or more years below grade level. And when you're falling 2 or more years below grade level, that means you often lack the prerequisite skills to do reading and writing well across the content areas. So this system at the secondary level, the MTSS system at the secondary level says content area teachers are primarily responsible for all the kids and working with the majority of kids who are going to be serviced here. That is through high quality core instruction and attempts to provide meaningful differentiation for kids who are just starting to fall below proficiency. And then for kids who are sitting here, we're talking about providing them with all of this plus daily supplemental intervention matched to those needs. Those needs in this series being deficiencies in basic reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills. So we just wanted to review this for you as you make your way through the PD that we're offering from today all the way to spring, particularly if you're one of our teams. And we will be asking teams who are involved in the secondary ELA series to gather data and to manipulate what we call response to instruction and intervention, in this case, reading and writing, for a student who is sitting in this particular area in terms of performance, and who really needs to have daily supplemental intervention in reading and writing, plus all the benefits of what we can provide through high quality core instruction. So that is the charge if you're in this particular series. If you're just joining us from the outside, that is something to think about in your model as you scale a multi-tiered system of support or work to scale it as part of a team to your middle and or high school. Around the triangle is just our problem solving process. This doesn't go away. It speaks to continuous school improvement. And it's superimposed at the system level, the grade level, and at the individual student level for those students that we need to be a little more sophisticated around with respect to mobilizing instruction intervention matched to their needs. At the top, we have equitable access to evidence-based practices for all students. That hasn't changed. That has been the moral undergirding of a multi-tiered system of support since tiered systems were launched many moons ago. And so equitable access means that kids don't have to have a label to get what they need when they need it, that we set up this fluid and flexible service delivery system so that we're giving kids what they need, when they need it, and why they need it. And that's one of the more difficult things about scaling a multi-tiered system of support at any level. It's often hard to be that flexible and fluid in our systems. So we have to work at that from an infrastructure standpoint. And then from an implementation standpoint, we really do have to look at what our setting offers in terms of those evidence-based practices. A, we have to make sure they are evidence-based, and B, we have to make sure that they're implemented with fidelity. So equitable access to evidence-based practices for all students is at the top here for a reason. And we want to pay attention to that as we make our way through the series this year. Before Laina starts, what we also want to say is that a multi-tiered system of support is about integrating academic, behavioral, and social emotional evidence-based practices. So we think about all the good things we know about positive behavioral support, when we think about all the good things we know about effective reading and writing practices, and we think about relationships with our kids and creating trusting and safe environments. These domains should work in an integrated way to facilitate or help you facilitate high levels of engagement. The number one predictor of outcomes for kids, academic, behavioral, and social emotional outcomes, is engagement. And so these are all going to work in mutually reinforcing ways. And Laina's going to speak to how we can maximize engagement through effective and integrated reading and writing instruction and intervention. So thank you for that. We will share this graphic with you in the Livebinder in case you want to take it back to your homes and talk about it with your teams. There is a top part to this graphic, and I'll just show you this in 2 seconds. These are the tenets of Pennsylvania's multi-tiered system of support. So you'll see core instruction, you'll see screening, you'll see shared ownership, you'll see database decisions, you will see RTI, which is responsiveness to intervention, how we kind of determine that, again, at all levels, but this is nuanced for secondary. Family engagement, a 2-tiered system at the secondary level, and professional learning. And so those are all the pieces that we have to hone at all levels in order to realize maximally beneficial and sustainable outcomes over time. So thank you, Kristen. I think I'm going to turn it over to you and stop sharing, and you can take it away.
And I think that should be it. I am sharing, am I not, the screen? Okay, great. Thanks, Dr. Collins. I appreciate that. So welcome everyone to the Secondary MTSS Enhancing ELA Outcome Series. And we are a statewide group today from Patton Central, Patton East, and Patton West. So who are our Central Region cross-disciplinary teams? So as Jen mentioned already, or Dr. Collins mentioned, we have teams that are here from the ELA, Secondary ELA series, as well as from our middle school, high school, secondary partnership series. So Central Region teams here today are Black Lake Valley, Salisbury Elementary, Coudersport Elementary, Junior, Senior High School, Wyomissing area, Williams Valley, Huntington area, Tulpahawken, and Northeast Bradford. Our Eastern Region teams, Sun Valley High School, Northerly Middle School, Hopewell Elementary, Penns Grove Middle School, Pocono Mountain West High School, Catasauqua Middle School High School, Fred S. Engel Middle School, and Springton Lake Middle School. And our teams from the West are Westinghouse Arts Academy Charter School, J.W. Parker Middle School, Butler area, Pine Richland School District, Burgettstown, Northgate, and East Allegheny. And we want to say once again, welcome to you all. So who's here to support you? We have consultants here to support each team from each of the 3 Patton offices, and as well as your intermediate unit consultants that many of you will probably already know, but I will just take a brief minute to introduce those of us out of the regional office who support overall MTSS. So at the Central Region and State Lead, we have Dr. Jennifer Collins, and the regional lead is Karen Brady. Out of the East office is Donna Halpin, and out of the West office is Silky Caparelli. These are the dates for upcoming trainings for the Secondary MTSS Enhancing ELA Outcomes series, as well as for the ELA Job Alike for middle school, high school. We are working currently on day 1, and you can see these here as well. If you need to reference this again, this PowerPoint is also in the Livebinder, which I know that Lisa has been entering that information into the chat for you to access. Here are the other 4 days as well. The final day being not for the masses. We know that there are other folks here on the call today who maybe are not a part of one of our series, and they this final day will be for just our teams. Okay, so at Patton, you will be receiving virtual tailored supports with specific school teams if you're a part of one of our series, and those will come from your IU as well as from your Patton consultants. The Livebinder link is accessible here. This has all the resources and handouts that you will need for today and subsequent training days. It can be accessed by the link that's in the chat or by using a QR code, for which all you need to do is hold up your smartphone's camera, and it should auto-populate to this little diagram in the corner, and should open that up for you. Quick Zoom refresher for those who need it. There will be some requests for you to respond, potentially orally or with microphones on. The mute and unmute button would be clicking the microphone on and off. Sometimes that inadvertently may get clicked, and you'll just want to make sure that it's not green and lit up, has a red line through it, so that sound isn't coming from your background. So, and you can access the audio controls by clicking the up arrow next to that and ensuring that the microphone that Zoom is currently using, as well as the audio, is the correct set that you're looking for. There are also ways to start and stop your video by turning on and off your video camera in the same fashion. Okay. The participants list Lisa has already explained, and that would be also on the black bar, and you can click that participant list. You can see everyone that's in there, as well as be able to rename yourself. At the bottom, there are also nonverbal gestures available for use. They may look like this. And in order to rename yourself, you will need to hover over your name, select more, and then go down to rename. There's a chat feature. Please be sure that if you are interested in using that, you can click the chat and enter information into there. There will be posts of handouts, resource links, and ways to get into the Livebinder added in there. If you have any tech issues, please feel free to send a message to a patent consultant. Laina has asked that we use the Annotate feature within Zoom today. So in order to access that Annotate feature, it will be located at the top bar on your screen. You'll need to click View Options, scroll down to Annotate, and you will see these features and these options. So under Annotate, what she's asked is that you use the stamp feature. And Laina, I think you said text or draw?
Text.
Okay, and then
Yeah.
as well, thank you. I clear out of my mind right there. And then there's the text feature as well that you'll be asked to use. And we at Patent can help you with that if by the time we get there, is no longer in your mind. So without further ado, I would like to go ahead and introduce Dr. Laina Santoro Edwards. So Dr. Santoro Edwards is a research professor with the Wheelock College of Education and Human Development at Boston University. She currently serves as co-principal investigator, or co-PI, of the National Lead for Literacy Center and the lead of the Instruction and Intervention strand for the National Center on Improving Literacy. With both centers, she works on projects related to professional learning, technical assistance, and instructional intervention for students with literacy-related disabilities. Dr. Santoro is also serving as co-PI on a project focused on the development and pilot testing of a Tier 3 literacy intervention, and has served as co-PI on a series of IES research studies focused on classroom discourse, vocabulary, and comprehension of students at risk of reading and reading failure. She has also taught pre- and in-service teachers and leaders at the undergraduate and graduate level, presented extensively on how to apply evidence-based instructional strategies in the classroom, and consulted with the state and local private agencies, including her regional work with Patent, to develop content related to MTSS implementation in the areas of writing and intensive intervention for students with dyslexia and language-based challenges in reading. Thank you, Dr. Santoro Edwards, for being with us this morning to kick off our secondary ELA series. I'm excited as always to learn from you and discuss MTSS as it relates to reading and writing for secondary students. And it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, let me get set up here, and I'd like to share my screen and get us going. Yeah, I'm excited to be here today too.
You might have to unshare.
Great, thank you. All righty, so welcome everybody. Let's get started for our afternoon. My name is Laina Santoro, and it's a pleasure to be with you for your series this year. We are kicking off and launching our Enhancing ELA Outcomes work. We're focusing on an MTSS structure, and though we'll be talking about both reading and writing, this will be a writing forward series. So I just want to make note of that, I think, and I'll talk to you today about why that is, why we're putting writing forward. So as I get going, I'm going to do some logistics and tell you about our plan for the day, but I also invite my patent colleagues to please jump in and interrupt me at any time, particularly if there's ways where you want to connect things to your series and your work in Pennsylvania. Any additional notes that will help our participants today make those connections, they're welcome. I'm flexible, and just stop me and we can have a conversation about those things. So We'll do that. With your materials, as your Pat and colleagues have shared, they are located on our Livebinder. What I want you to know are these specific things which I'll be referencing to this morning. So there is a copy of the PowerPoint, and that's posted. The file name is listed in parentheses. That PowerPoint just allows you to follow along and have the contents that I'm sharing with you live here. The second thing I really want you to know is there and to look for either as we're presenting today or later in follow-up is something called the MTSS writing scope and sequence. Critical document that is also posted on Livebinder in different iterations, and they're posted in these different iterations for your convenience and use, and I'll talk to you about that when we get there. But a writing scope and sequence is really important. Also, there's an action plan that corresponds with that writing scope and sequence that will help you move forward in your implementation work, and so know that that is there. It's a Word document. There's some student writing surveys, also in a, I think, Word document form. They're there for you to reference. And then finally, a set of practice guides and reports. These are national reports that have summarized research in the area of reading and writing for secondary learners. And when I say secondary, we're talking about students from grade 4 through 12. And I know that's a great long grade span there, but from a research perspective, that's usually how we view secondary, through that lens of grades 4 through 12. And that's what's covered in terms of these guidance documents, these reports. So they're there as well. I will speak to all of the materials as we move through our day. Finally, I want to do some writing today since we're writing a writing forward series, and I'd love you to make sure you have a pen or pencil on hand and paper. The writing activity that I'd like to do with you requires the physical act of writing versus typing. And so if you just look around your desk space, make sure you have a pen or pencil and paper for that activity. That'd be great. You can kind of look for that if you need to. So as Kirsten shared, we have Zoom as our platform to share and talk today. I will leverage that chat box as much as I can. So I think you all are familiar with putting your responses in chat. We'll do that. I also do want to experiment a little bit with you with the annotate function if you have that accessible on your platform. As Kirsten demonstrated, you hover around the top of your screen with your cursor and you'll see a bar which allows you to select an annotate feature. When you select that annotate feature, you'll have the choice of selecting either text based on how I prompt you or the stamp bar. So I'm just reinforcing. If you do not have access to that, because I know we have different settings on our Zoom platform, no worries, you can completely respond in chat. So don't worry at all about not being able to access that. So how we'll participate. This is at a glance. I know this is was shared as our introduction, but I just want you to see the content we're moving through today is our kickoff session. So I think of it as overview, orientation, getting you grounded, and giving you a few things to think about as you start your implementation for the year. And then we'll meet at if you're following the series, we'll meet at the end of the month, and we'll have a session on micro level writing, which covers transcription and syntax. Then at the start of November, we'll move into something around macro level writing, which is your composition process. I think you're probably familiar with. And we will conclude the fall with a look at reading and writing for comprehension purposes. So that is actually, no, that's Jen's session that will end November. So what I'd like you to do is I would love a quick input into chat on why you're here in this series or why you're coming to the session today. What's your purpose for being here? And go ahead and put that in the chat box. I know through the way we've labeled ourselves as participants, I can see who you are. But in the chat box, I'd like you to tell us why you're here, why you're interested in this series, why you're participating. I'm going to stop my screen for just a minute so I can watch the chat box, which I can't do when I'm in my full presentation slide share view. And just let me know, let's share our purpose for coming. I'd love to know why you're here. And as you're doing that, I'm here because I'm passionate about instruction. I love reading and writing. I'm specifically interested in writing instruction. So I and why I would love to work with you on the series. This is fabulous. Thank you. Excellent. Yeah, I'm glad some of you are focusing on the writing piece specifically. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to see it just flash through the chat. So I'm very, very appreciative. Keep it coming. Others who are also share my love for reading and writing, my enthusiasm for that instruction. Thank you so much. Keep it coming. I'm going to switch back over to my slides, but continue to share your purpose, your being for being here. Thankfully, the chat log is something we can save and go back to, and I would love to do so to see how you are here and what you are interested in terms of the series. Thank you for those introductions. So I would like to share an introduction, and as Jen has shared, I just feel like there is an absence that I can't articulate with the series and with my work with Patton through MTSSR, Enhancing Secondary Outcomes. And that's my dear, dear friend and colleague, William Van Cleve. As Jen shared, he passed away unexpectedly this past spring, and it was devastating. It was devastating to our education community broadly, and for many of us personally, myself included. William just touched my world. He was a wonderful colleague to work with. I am very thankful to consider him a friend as well. And I loved working with William. He was, I always told him he was the yin to my yang, or my yang to my yin, however you want to put that combination together. But he was such a strong counterpoint to my style of presenting and my the way that I access content. And we made a great a pair in terms of colleagues. So he is just greatly missed. It is an absence deeply felt. And as Jen says, I will move forward in this series. I cannot be William by any stretch. I cannot replace him for sure. But yeah, I will be a good steward to his work to the greatest extent I can. And yeah, he's with us, and I just wanted to acknowledge that out of the gate, that this will be an unusual, but in some ways very special year. We will bring his work and continue to bring it forward. So thank you. Also within this context, I need to thank the colleagues in Pennsylvania and at Patton, including William, who were the groundbreaking committee who steered this work. We created the series collaboratively. So the work that I'm sharing is evolving from multiple perspectives and multiple colleagues in terms of their input and thinking, in terms of what makes sense here in this writing and reading series for secondary learners. So this is also important to acknowledge. And though I get to present and talk to you about the work, it's grounded on hard work by lots of others in Pennsylvania. So this is how we're going to structure our day, our morning together. What I'd like to do is ground you. And what does it mean when we talk about core ELA instruction? What does that mean? And where do those practices come from? So I'd like to highlight and summarize the evidence-based practices that are connected within the context of English language arts for secondary students. That'll just get us kind of anchored. We'll take a break somewhere between 10 and 10:15, based on the natural kind of break where we are of the content. We'll talk about now my writing forward piece to have you leave today thinking a little bit more about writing instruction than perhaps you did in the past. So I'd like to talk about scheduling writing instruction and how important it is to have daily writing. We'll look at that writing scope and sequence that I mentioned. And then if we have time, and I hope we do, I want to highlight a few things about motivation. This connects to what Jen said about we are working all components and supports within our MTSS triangle, including social and emotional needs of our students. That motivation piece for secondary learners, for writing is really key. I would like to say a few words about it if we have time today to get you started. So here's where I would love you to think about how you're going to take this content out the door. The first two things go together. As we start, I want to introduce you to some guidance documents that center these evidence-based practices for secondary learners in reading and writing. I want you to know about the guided documents, but I also want you to pick one that will take your work forward throughout the year, and think about how you might do it. The second thing is to build your awareness, to start to have you think a little bit about the writing piece and how these two pieces of writing work together. The micro, meaning the foundational skills of writing, as well as the macro structures of writing. So how do those intersect? What does that mean? Just to give you a little awareness, because we'll move forward and have a couple additional sessions that dive deep into each. Scheduling is key. If writing is important, we've got to schedule it. And looking at your schedule in a way that perhaps increases time for writing or brings more awareness to how you are implementing writing instruction. And then finally, identify some ways of thinking about supporting social emotional needs of your students and motivation. So that's our game plan. So let's get grounded. I want to talk about what core reading and writing instruction includes at the secondary level. So first, I'm going to show you the very traditional MTSSR model of implementation with 3 tiers. This is what I think we're all familiar with, but then I'm going to shift and I want to show you a visual of what Jen said works for secondary and why we're thinking about that 2-tier system at the secondary level. So because this is so familiar generally, I want to start here with the underpinnings of what MTSS is about. So this is an MTSS series. We're talking about using multi-tiered systems of support at a systems level, meaning your system of implementation, your scheduling, your professional learning, all of that at systems level. And the whole idea behind MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, is to be a model of prevention and a way of resourcing your system in a way that's efficient. Part of that efficiency is looking to see if we can build a core that meets the needs of most of our students. And the research really is targeted around that 80%, building a successful core where 80% of our students are successful readers and writers. There are additional tiers of support within the context of MTSS. Those additional tiers of support are intended to be provided to fewer students. So for example, in a traditional elementary model, tier 2 supports target about 15% or so of your student population optimally. We know that's often not the reality, but that's the optimal target. Those targeted levels of support, when I think about targeted levels of support, they're things like reteaching, pre-teaching, maybe enhancing content in a way that boosts students' interaction with it so they can be more successful in the core. Finally, there's this top tier where we're looking at intensive intervention for a very few number of students. Those students we really want to pay attention to in a very detailed way to ensure that they are responding to instruction. That's your response to intervention. How are those students responding to instruction? So with the National Center on Improving Literacy, we're in the process of building a secondary model, if you will, a way to think about implementation at the secondary level. And this is very much aligned and intersects with Pennsylvania's work in view of a two-tiered system. And so if you're looking on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see that Tier 1 support is intended to be coordinated. It's intended to focus on your content literacy and discipline-specific literacy. Implementation, that is your core. At your advanced tiers, that's your second level, right? Your 2-tier. We're looking at it for students who have those needs to enhance your core. If they have trouble accessing that content related to meaning. So these are kids who might be okay readers. They're kind of keeping up with the core, but they're not accessing the meaning and vocabulary required, right? So they have very specific needs, and they will require some core enhancement to help them access the meaning level implementation of your Tier 1 support. Also, along with that, we have kids too, as you know, at the secondary level who have word level reading needs. They also require intervention. So when you think of your 2 tiers in secondary, you have your core ELA, and then at the top, we're looking at these advanced tiers that are scheduled to focus on areas of need. So it's scheduling your additional skill groups or instruction that requires that additional support. Overall, maybe I'll stop there and let Jen interject. Jen, any additional clarifications you want to use to enhance it?
I was just typing in the chat box to reinforce what you were saying, but that's exactly right. You know, that Tier 1 is standards aligned, high quality core instruction to include supports like preview teaching, extended core instruction, meeting with students in small groups who are just starting to fall below proficient. So we would do that for all kids as part of general high quality standards line core instruction. So trying not to think about tiers as discrete entities, but rather fluid and flexible. Although in this case at the secondary level, content area teachers are doing as much as they can for all students. And then for the students who are just starting to fall below proficient status. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So when we move forward in framing all this, what I want you to think about today is reflecting on, is that core meeting the needs of most of your students? That's your first question. Is it currently meeting the needs of most of your students? And that answer is critical, because that means you need to think about increasing the rigor of your core if it's not. If it is, we're looking at down the road, we're looking at, well, then how are the advanced tiers working? How are those, as Jen said, those fluid model of instruction and area of student needs, how's that working? So that's your primary question. The second is, I want you to think about your writing instruction specifically. And I want you might have a lot of the practices I'm going to talk about today. I think they're very familiar. They've been in our field a long time. So I may not be sharing a new visualization with you about what good writing instruction is. That's okay. I want you to then think about, is what we're talking about implemented with fidelity and consistency? So that's the key there. Do I have these practices in place that I'll be talking about? But additional question, are they implemented with consistency, with fidelity, right? With cohesion? Is it an aligned, cohesive system? The two most important framing questions we're going to talk about today. So just for fun, I told you optimally, your system should be supporting most of your students with a rigorous core that provides successful reading and writing outcomes for the majority of your kids, 80-some%. If that's the case, you have a right-sided up, properly constructed triangle. That's number one. If your system, and you would know this through data, but it also certainly can be your experience and practice, if your system is is struggling because you have so many students requiring intensive intervention, right? More students require that really intensive level of instruction. And you know that because your system is at, I would say, at load, at capacity. You have so many instructors, you're trying to figure out a schedule where we're meeting these students' needs, or you know that you're not meeting students' needs because we don't have capacity. A lot of referrals to special education. So that would be your number 2 example if you're experiencing that. Number 3 would be like everybody is at that middle level, everybody okay at the core, but you're enhancing your core. You're enhancing the core. You're continually bringing in, enhancements, tricks, things to make your core better. It's like a patchwork thing. We're trying to really help support that instruction, but it's sort of piecemeal and it's basically all in the middle. And finally, maybe number 4, you aren't sure. It's all over the place. Who knows? I just came to attend this session as an individual. I don't know what my system is doing. It's number 4. I would love you to reflect on your system and just in the chat, insert number. Where do you think your system is? Where's your sense of it? Is it number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4? I'll keep this up for a couple seconds more so you can visualize and reflect, and then just go right into chat and put what you think your system is currently looking like or feeling like if you haven't really looked at data. It could be looking like from a database perspective or feeling like as someone in the trenches trying to serve needs of kids. So 1, 2, 3, or 4. And I'll have to stop to just check in on the chat. Great, thank you. This is tremendously helpful. I'm seeing a lot of 3s, which means that maybe there's kind of, to me, not a lot of cohesion. We're trying to put in the gaps. We're trying to, do the best we can to fill in the holes, which helps, I think, us moving forward to really say, tailor things around. Let's get a core, rigorous core in place, probably as the next step. Yeah. Thank you. This is helpful. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of 3s and some 4s too. Saying, yeah. Good. A couple of 1s I did see, so that I congratulate you all. That's hard work, as you know, to achieve number 1, but that's what our series is about and what Patton's work is about. And that hard work can be very rewarding when you have your a system streamlined, efficient, and well-resourced. Yeah, thanks everybody. So let's talk about what are the evidence-based practices that are implemented within an effective system. So one thing I want to share is and define is the differences between what a program is and what instructional practices are. So a program is an evidence-based or well-researched program, meaning the program was used in rigorous studies. The results for kids are very positive. Those programs used demonstrate good outcomes for kids. Programs are things that are bundled, published curriculum. So a program in the area of writing, which we'll talk a little bit about, for example, is Step Up to Writing. So that program, it's curriculum, it's got the nuts and bolts. That's what we're talking about, is thorough curriculum and instruction. A program bundled tend to be commercially published resources. Instructional practices are the things that you can implement right now, every day, despite what program you have. So an instructional practice is just good instruction that works regardless of program. And the instructional practices are things you can take and implement and integrate within your program, right? Or your program or your curriculum of instruction. Both are very important. So your programs are things that you really want to pay attention to help support your core, make your core and your core curriculum, your scope of your instruction more robust. Instructional practices are key too, because we want to know what are the things that make good instruction work? What are the ingredients there? What is, I think, powerful about instructional practices is that our research says that they work. Regardless of program, these things work. If I do them, my students have more successful outcomes, and they can be integrated. So you can take them and, if whatever program I've got on the shelf now, I can bring those practices in and integrate. So there's two things you want to be working. I know your patent colleagues, when they work with our teams, with your teams, they'll really help guide you on programs. They'll have specific consultation with you about what your data looks like and what are some programs that might be recommended based on your specific data on how to enhance and improve that core instruction. I'm going to be talking about the world on the right-hand side. What does good instruction look like? What are the instructional practices that you can integrate into things? What are the instructional practices that you would want to see in a core program? So if your core program is missing a lot of the instructional practices we're talking about, then that then sort of connects that conversation between programs and practices. So there's a place where you can look for evidence-based programs. The What Works Clearinghouse has something called intervention reports. You can use the link there and go look at what programs have evidence and have been well researched. The National Center on Intensive Intervention has something called tools charts. That's a place to go if you're looking for the supports that are required for students with greater need, so more intensive intervention. On the right-hand side is what I'll talk about today, the instructional practices. I want to introduce you to some guidance documents and sources of great information that you can go and use to guide your implementation this year. So for instructional practices, we're looking at a couple of reports from the What Works Clearinghouse, and then a couple of reports from the Carnegie Foundation. And let me talk to you a little bit more about what those are. So on the left-hand side of your screen, you see the Carnegie Corporation reports. They focus on reading and writing for secondary learners, right? So I said the secondary learners, grades 4 and above, 4 through 12. The Institute of Education Sciences has published the What Works Clearinghouse practice guides, and there's two really good sources. One is Improving Adolescent Literacy, that focuses more on a reading side of instructional practices, and then a second report looks at teaching secondary students in terms of writing. So those are the two. You can see that we have reading and writing from Carnegie. We have reading and writing from the Institute of Education Sciences. So as I move through and tell you more about these guidance documents, what I would like you to do as a takeaway is to be ready to leave today thinking about one of the 4 that you could use as a guidance document to anchor your discussion with your team in this series. So one document that you could use as a guidepost to reference some of these practices that are effective. I want you to start to think about not only selecting one of these 4 documents, but how you might use it. So for example, if I'm a school leader, one thing I might think about is, okay, I'm going to choose, let's say, the IS practice guide on teaching secondary students to write effectively. I bet we could build some professional learning community work around that document and basically chunk it up, read 10 pages at a time, come together and talk about it. that would be a wonderful adjunct complement to the work you're doing in this series. It's sort of like your book club. It's your book club document. And so that's, get excited about it. Be ready to choose one that you think will provide your team and your work moving forward some grounding and information that you might need, and be ready to kind of use it and talk about it. My suggestion, as I will talk about all four, but my suggestion is picking either the Writing Next report or the Teaching Secondary Students to Write Effectively, because this is a writing forward series and you'll see a lot of great parallels. And I'd love you to see that, right? That what you're reading in the research, these practice guides, is reflected in what we're training. If you've been in this series before, I know we've got return teams, which I love. I'm excited if that is you, if that is who you are. Then if you really immerse yourself in the writing, pick one of the reading reports, pick the Reading Next report. Pick Improving Adolescent Literacy. So just my suggestion on how you might do that. So let me tell you about these documents. All four documents are based on the evaluation of the research literature. So teams for Carnegie, teams for the What Works Clearinghouse, teams of researchers and leading educators in the field did a thorough, comprehensive literature search of what the research says is effective. They put in criteria for what research means. Research is high quality, use of randomized control trials or quasi-experimental designs. So the research had to have rigor. It just wasn't, I'm going to go into a classroom and do some stuff, collect some data, and then report that as research. This is high quality research with those recognized experimental designs that give us confidence that the effects we see have meaning. The other key to what high quality evidence-based work is, you've got to have a high sample size, like a lot of kids in these studies to know that it's effective. So there's some criteria there that are making that important. So these teams went out and they did a literature search, restricted their literature search to high quality studies, and then they evaluated the data. One of the things they did to evaluate the data is they did a computation of something called an effect size. So an effect size is essentially telling you what was the degree of benefit for participating in the intervention condition compared to the comparison condition. And what we want to do is look for a larger degree of benefit of, right? We really want that practice to benefit kids. So in these reports, in the guidance documents, you'll see ranges of effect sizes. If you see something that's 0.2 or lower, that tends to indicate a smaller effect. 0.5, around that is a medium, moderate effect. 0.8 screams at you. That's a large effect. This practice really has strong impact for kids and students when it comes to the outcomes we're thinking about. Anything that large, you've got to really look at closely. So let me talk to you about the four reports, starting with reading. I'm going to start with the reading first, then go to the writing. So first, there's the Reading Next report. So with the Reading Next report, we have a team, right, of researchers who are interested in improving adolescent vocabulary and comprehension outcomes. And so what you'll find in that report is a summary of that research, right? Looking at all the effect sizes, looking at what practices stand above others in terms of helping support comprehension, vocabulary, and reading outcomes for our adolescent readers. So on the screen here, I wanted you to see a summary of what those practices are. This is what the Reading Next report says. The report says, how do I improve my adolescent outcomes? I've got to teach explicitly and directly. I've got to embed effective instructional principles in my instruction, help my students be motivated learners. really build around text-based collaboration. And the top 5 is strategic tutoring. So really looking then at who requires additional support, and tutoring, meaning essentially just the reteaching, pre-teaching, additional deep support for kids. You can just scan the list on the left for the additional instructional strategies that have led to improvement. On the right-hand side are infrastructure, things that led to your infrastructure, which is key. If I have leaders here today, I know thinking about the system perspective. And so infrastructure improvements, these are things within my system that have contributed to outcomes. So for example, extended time for literacy means scheduling. How I'm supporting professional learning. So if that's in your plan, that has links to outcomes for kids. And you can see the others there. These are just a summary. You have got access to the report itself. But I'm curious from you all about, do you see practices on the screen? Don't do anything yet, but do you see practices on the screen that you think you're really successful with, that this is really working? And I would like to know those. So what I'd like you to do right now is look at the screen. Is there something that you feel is really successful currently from this list of instructional improvements or infrastructure improvements? And I want you to pick one only, one. And then either in the chat box, just type that one and submit it. Or if you want to experiment with Annotate, you can click the Annotate key, then scroll to the stamp. And when I select stamp, I'm gonna get the check mark. And so watch me. I feel like one of my strengths is around effective instructional principles, if I was in the classroom or in a school system. And so I'm going to put my little check mark right on it, right on top. So what I'd like you to do is either with Annotate or with the chat box, find your one that you're feeling pretty successful with right now. Fabulous. And I appreciate these live interactions. It's like a poll. I can see where, and it will honestly help my instruction, my series moving forward. I'll know where to weight certain things in our series. I am over the moon thrilled about number 1, I must say. If you are coming in maybe where you've had some real deep work around explicit and direct instruction, maybe your school, though you're here for secondary, has done ECRI, for example, enhanced core reading instruction, that would cue you up nicely, I think, for that. Fabulous, fabulous. Nice. I'm just going to leave this open a couple more seconds. Let you finish. Yeah, nice. And again, you're welcome to use the chat too, if it's hard for you to do Annotate. Yeah, so I just looking visually, technology component, I'm thrilled, absolutely thrilled that is something that resonates a lot there. Text-based collaborative learning also. And for those on the infrastructure side, biggies, I see number 10 and number 13 are standout. So you're really thinking about extending that time for literacy and use of teacher teams. Okay, I'm going to ask you to stop, and I know it'll take technology a bit to catch up with my stop. I'm going to ask you to stop. These are great, thank you. I'm going to clear. And now I want you to do the same thing, but indicate your area of greatest need or maybe inconsistency in terms of implementation. So same thing. I think we could have inferred it from the other chart, but let's see a direct look at how you're feeling about these practices. So looking and marking the area of greatest need or challenge or inconsistency, area around where you'd like to work most. And I'm trying to take some notes live here because this is invaluable to me as we move forward too. So a lot with motivation and self-directed learning. So maybe that piece that I mentioned kind of just starting today, starting our conversation about emotional and motivation, emotional based supports and motivation is a good one to have. Yeah, intensive writing is big. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, so how do you intensify writing instruction? What does that mean? Great. Yeah, so while some of you, it's very interesting. I think we've got a half and half. Well, some of you felt more more confident about your schedule related to extended time for literacy. I'm seeing an equal amount who's still working on that, which is the big piece, really is. It's key. A comprehensive and coordinated literacy program. And I think collectively between my work with you and Patton, your Patton colleagues, 15, please know that will be an emphasis that we'll work on together. Great. All right, everybody. Just your last, I'll give it a minute or so for anybody who wants to I mean, a second or two. Great, great. All right, I'm going to say stop. Thank you very much. I don't know if anybody from Patton has any reflections based on what you've seen. You're welcome to jump in as I make this transition and clear the drawings. And
I think the responses are pretty consistent with what our teams have reported, you know, historically in terms of needs and strengths. So yeah.
Yeah, great. I don't know, for me, it's helpful to see visually. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, it is very helpful.
Okay, so that was the reading next report. And so along with that, we have an evidence-based practice guide. It's called a practice guide. Excuse me. Take a drink. Yes, so we have an evidence-based practice guide by the What Works Clearinghouse. And that it's similarly structured in terms of how research was reviewed in the literature that was analyzed. What's a little different about how the What Works Clearinghouse practice guides are structured is that they operate through a panel of experts in the field, researchers, leading educators are on that panel, and they make some judgments about how to prioritize recommendations, as well as indicating to you the strength of that recommendation in terms of the research that we currently know. So in terms of the IES practice guide, we're looking at recommendations around, again, look at the explicit and systematic instruction for vocabulary, for comprehension. A similar, we're seeing content around the extended discussions, right, for text meaning and interpretation, and motivation for students, as well as providing support related to intensive intervention. So I still see some of the annotate stuff coming up, and that's fine if you're trying to get your system to work and experiment with it a little bit. I'm going to clear those and ask that you just hold for a bit. We'll have another activity coming up, truly pretty much like the next slide. So I'm going to clear those, and we'll go to the next slide, and you'll get another go at it. I want you to hear the author, well, the leading author of the practice guide. This is the What Works Clearinghouse practice guide. I just listen to what these practices are about. Just hear someone else sort of tell you what's happening related to secondary reading for adolescents. So let me toggle over here to my video, and I will play you a video clip from that practice guide. And if you can't hear it for any reason, Patton folks, just stop me and we'll cue this up. Is that all right? Can you hear it?
We hear a little bit, but we don't see anything except the little folder that has all of the videos in.
Okay, I'll try. I got a different way to do it. Okay, here, let's try this.
It's really quiet, Laina.
Okay, hold on. No worries. Let me try again. I'm going to stop my share. All right. Hopefully this will work. Here we go.
University, and I was chair of the committee that put together the practice guide on improving adolescent literacy. The goals of the panel in creating the practice guide for adolescent literacy was to create a document that would serve as an informative guide to curricular practices for teachers in middle and high school. The practice guide is important for administrators and teachers because the major crisis we have at the moment is in middle and high school literacy. We've got students who are so far behind that they will never catch up. We're denying them the opportunity to pursue advanced degrees, to pursue careers of their own choice, and we limit the usefulness that they will serve in society. The problem has been that middle and high school teachers often don't believe that it's their job to teach reading, that should happen in elementary school. And because of that, we are trying to change the attitude and provide some simple to implement practices, maybe some that aren't so simple to implement as well, but to give them an idea of what they could do immediately to improve the reading of their students. The guide has 5 recommended practices that came directly out of the research. So those are, number 1, students need explicit vocabulary instruction. This isn't a very popular idea for a long time because vocabulary is thought to occur almost naturally or as a result of wide reading. What we found is that it needs to be taught and needs to be taught very explicitly. This is critical in content areas where vocabulary carries the load of the meaning. The second thing is that we know that students benefit if we teach them comprehension strategies, and they need to be taught explicitly again. So this is how to approach a text and either construct or extract or understand the meaning of that text. This again is the result of a careful analysis of the research and is very clear it's one of the most potent instructional interventions that we can use. The third recommendation is that students need to engage in discussion about text. This is probably the most unusual of the recommendations because it's the result of very recent analysis of the research that shows that students do extremely well when they are engaged in collaboratively discussing the text. This tends to be focused on literature in the research at the moment, but is very clearly applicable to content area material as well. The fourth recommendation is motivation of students, that we need to make sure that students are motivated to read and engaged in the reading task. For the purpose of the website, we've collapsed motivation and engagement with discussion around text, because discussion around text is one way of increasing the engagement of students with that text. The last recommendation is about targeted and intensive tutoring for students whose problems are more serious than those that can be handled by the classroom teacher. The teacher needs to be able to identify those students and recommend that they be helped by a specialist who can arrange for tutoring in either individual or small group sessions. This is tutoring that goes well beyond the normal classroom regimen of instruction and is the way to bring students who are far behind in their achievement in literacy up to grade level or as near as possible.
So I'm going to stop it right there and come back to see you. So I just wanted you to hear one of the leaders who was involved in summarizing the research from the What Works Clearinghouse, IES, Institute of Education Sciences Practice Guide, talking about the 5 recommended practices from that report. So I've summarized really the reading, right? Reading next, as well as the evidence-based practice guide from the What Works Clearinghouse. Now I want to shift over and talk to you about the writing sources. There's 2 guidance documents to know about. One is that Carnegie sponsored Writing Next report. The Writing Next report focuses on the essential purpose of trying to help our students become better writers. It was structured in the same way with leading authors who helped coordinate a team who summarized the research. What I'm looking at now on my screen are the practices that have been identified as important to helping students with writing. So practices with large or strong effects, that use of writing strategies, getting students to summarize, collaborative writing, setting product goals. Medium to moderate effects are word processing and sentence combining. And then practices, a set of practices with mild or smaller effects includes the use of pre-writing warm-ups to get kids ready to write, inquiry-based writing activities, using the writing process, using models, anchor texts, for example, and writing for content area learning. What I want you to understand, though, is that even though we have a collection of practices with smaller or mild effects, I want you to understand that anything that would rise to the importance of being discussed in these guidance documents are essential to pay attention to. They might have milder effects, but just think if you package and do a great job of implementing several of those practices with perhaps milder to more moderate effects. That's key. It's how you package and use all these strategies in an instructional approaches that's important. Again, even though they might have milder effects, yeah, they might if I do them in isolation, but if I have them incorporated into a comprehensive writing program, they're going to see larger benefit. Key too is that I really want you to pay attention to things that have a strong effect. That in and of itself, for example, the writing strategies and the summarization are absolutely key in terms of implementation in a strong writing program. So knowing what the strong practices are, in addition to understanding that there's instructional power when the approaches are combined intentionally and systematically, is how to really understand what the research says. So let's try the same thing again that we did with the Reading Next report. Now I'm going to ask you to look at the practices identified in the Writing Next report. And on the screen here, please use the Annotate feature again, and select the one practice that you feel strongly about in terms of implementation, meaning successful implementation. You feel like you're doing a good job with it, and put a check mark there. So it's working for you. Great, everybody. And I'm happy to see summarization come out with lots of enthusiastic checks. That's great. Good. Oh, you know, it's a bright spot of my day, and it really is to see summarization. And also over on the far right, a good number with the process writing approach, right? Using the writing process. Great, keep it coming. Thank you. And I'm going to give you a couple seconds more to finish. And now I'm going to say stop. Let the technology catch up, but please stop your responses. You can visually see here patterns, and I'm very pleased. But let me clear these, and now return and do the one where you're not as confident. It's more challenging, maybe not implemented as consistently. you don't feel as strongly about that practice in terms of implementation. Great. Yeah, I know collaborative writing's a tough. Yeah. And setting product goals. Okay. And writing strategies. So I'm seeing, yeah, so I'm happy with the summarization, but then I just, it's a good feedback for me as we move into the series that writing strategies, the collaborative writing and product goals might be areas where we can fold in some content. So that's great. And study of models, that's, yeah, great. And we'll definitely, I definitely have some ideas of how we can talk about that. But this is very helpful. Thank you so much for your responses. I'll give you a couple more seconds to put in those final stamps. Great. Yeah, I'm looking at the checks on the bottom of the screen and wondering, hopefully I'm inferring that you are just experimenting with the stamp versus no practices. But let's see. Well, good. Thank you. So I'm going to clear these. Wonderful. And come back over to my slide here. So yeah, just remember, really pay attention to strong effect sizes, but knowing that even if something has a smaller effect, it is important to pay attention to in combination. So the second writing a report aligned with writing instruction for secondary students is that What Works Clearinghouse Practice Guide. This centers on discussing 3 primary practices that are evidence-based. The first being model, practice, reflect. That's essentially explicit instruction. Model is the model of instruction, right? Guided is the guided practice piece, the we do together, right? We're practicing together. And the reflect is your extension. We're reflecting you do and apply your writing yourself. So it's really model, practice, reflect is the secondary version of the I do, you do, we do. So we've got explicit instruction there, the integration there of reading and writing. And here there's talk about how to use assessment to inform student writing as key. I want you to also hear the lead author of this report. So I'm going to stop my screen for a minute. I like showing videos off and not embedded in my PowerPoint. I just think they're clearer versus coming integrated. So let me get the next video queued up for you. Just a second, please. All righty. Now I got to share this with you. See, share. Here we go. This is Steve Graham, and he's the author of this report.
I spent a lot of my life, almost since 1983, devoted to teaching writing and learning how to do a better job of this. Why is that the case? Some of those are some of the reasons are idiosyncratic to me, and some relate to very personal things. So one is that initially I was most interested in teaching reading. And I realized that there are hundreds and hundreds of people who look at reading and investigate it. And when I looked at writing, I realized that there is a much smaller group. And at the same time, I was moving from being a reader to being a writer. And I was fascinated because I did not consider myself to be a good writer as to this transition that I was making from actually feeling comfortable in my own skin as a writer to previously not feeling so comfortable with that. And it increased my interest in writing. And I wanted to know more about how professional writers wrote. And I started reading a lot about that. But at the same time, I've always been interested in kids who have struggled. And in part, I think, this is an idiosyncratic thing, I was a kid who had great difficulty in school in my first 4 years of school. I got a great teacher in 5th grade, turned that around. The other thing that's driven this is I had a daughter who really struggled mightily with writing. In 1st and 2nd grade, she had a great deal of difficulty with handwriting and forget spelling. It was almost impossible for her. She was able to turn that around through using word processing and a fluky thing with Xena and the Warrior Princess that helped her become a better speller. When my daughter was making...
So I'm going to stop it there. I just want you to be able to hear and see some of these folks. And what I love about Steve Graham is that he talks very personally about why he became interested in studying writing instruction for students. And it was really his daughter's experience that connected him to this area of need in our work. And so he became a researcher focused on writing instruction. So though you are looking at these things as these guidance practice documents, they're written and compiled by real people who have a true interest in helping kids with these areas of need. And Steve Graham is an excellent example of that. So I just want you to put some faces with people connected to these very important documents. So let me move forward and close out this section and give you some reflection time. What I want you to know as we leave this section of content is that you can use any of the documents that I want you to pick one, any of them, to guide your implementation. So one way that you might decide to use these is as a self-reflection, a little bit like I did with you collectively. So you might take this document, go back as a team, look at the recommendations, and for each recommendation, each practice, right, that is highlighted, you could discuss whether it's fully, partially implemented or not in place at all, and use it as a way, a metric, a guidance to support your work throughout the year. It will help you focus as a team on areas where you might want to explore work further. So that's one way. Just take the recommendations from the report or the practices that are suggested as highly effective, and rate them: fully implemented, partially implemented, not in place. To get a fully, I mean, the standard is high. These are in there, they're implemented well, they're implemented with consistency, cohesion, and alignment. Partially, spotty, sort of inconsistent. Some teachers might do it really well, others maybe not as consistently. And maybe it's a practice that just isn't in place. Even if a handful are doing it, maybe it's just not at the level that you would want to see. I would still count that as not in place. So that's one way to do it. And as I said, another way to use these tools is to create a learning community or study group around them, a book club, if you will. It's your key document, chunk the pages into sections, read a section at a time, and come talk about it. So this is your chance now to check Livebinder for those reports. You can also, they're available readily online as PDFs. So if you search Reading Next Report or Writing Next Report in your search engine, you'll get access to it that way. IES practice guides with part of that title will get you access to it. I want you to just take a look at what they are. I know I'm not giving you team time to meet today per se, but if you have a sense of which report you would like to use as a guidance document this year, that's what I want you to land on. Which one do you think you'd like to use? If writing is new for you, if you're new to the series, I'd suggest either the Writing Next Report or the Teaching Secondary Students to Write Effectively. If you've done a lot of writing and you're ready to kind of think about reading, you could use the number 1 Reading Next Report, or the Adolescent Literacy Effective Classroom and Intervention Practices. So a couple minutes just to do this. Give yourself some time to look around, find these documents, process it a little bit, think about any questions you might have for this first section of content. I'm going to just pause my talking, give a few minutes here, about 3-4 minutes for you just to look. Yeah, continue, just take the time and look at those documents.
Lena, while folks are still contributing, there was a question about, some of the practice guides like Writing Next are from 2004. And should people be concerned about that? And so I comment on it, but you might want to comment on it.
Yeah. Well, so a couple things is I think I love the question. That is a really important question to ask. Is it relevant? Is the source current? And in the area of writing instruction, I'll have to say that it is. Our research has been slower to emerge in the area of writing instruction than the other areas of work that we do with students. And so these continue to be the source documents that we are looking at. And if you look, what I think is a great consistency. So though What Works Clearinghouse has come out more recently, the practices are still very much aligned and similar. So you can see, though the Writing Next was issued earlier, those practices are still being reflected in the What Works Clearinghouse guide. So there's synergy there, there's overlap, which to me says we're still seeing the same things in our work related to the research on writing. So we have that commonality. So Jen, I don't know if that reinforces what you said. Yeah, great, everybody. So let me flip back to the PowerPoint here and have you just where you're headed with this. This is what I'd love to know. So let me show my screen again. You may not have firmly selected one yet, but I want to know where you're leaning. So on my screen, you're welcome to stamp next to the report that you think you might be using as your guidance document. If you want to be bold, you're welcome in the third column to use the Annotate Text feature and then use that to type in why you chose that source. I'm curious there too. You don't have to. I think the stamping is working really well. But if you are able to experiment, try Annotate. Instead of choosing stamp, choose text. And if you choose text, you'll get a little text insert where I can type on the screen and say why I chose it. Great. I'm glad I see a lot with the IS Practice Guide for Secondary Students. I think it's a great document. It gives a lot of instructional examples, so it sort of pushes it a little bit to more practice than just a research, what the research says document. Fabulous. Great. And thanks for those who are trying to use the text feature. And the low readers, absolutely. If that you're really looking at lower performing students and you want to look at what the reading strategies are, I think moving to one of the reading reports works. Great. Thanks. Excellent. Yeah, and some of you are selecting documents based on things you look and see might be some alignment. That's great. It's a great way to go too. Any of them would work as a document to use. Though, despite being a writing forward, a writing emphasis, we're having a writing emphasized in our series. These are great. Thank you. So I'm going to say a couple seconds left for final responses. Great. And I'm going to now say stop. And thanks, everybody. Stop. I'm going to clear the drawings. Great, great, great. Very, very helpful. Good. So just a quick check-in if there are any questions.
Not to distract Lena from the overarching guides, we did share, a bunch of people are just sharing some references from Steve Graham since you had shown his
good.
video,
Yeah.
just because he's such an authority in the field. So some of his books would be great for in-depth, book studies over time, to keep honing practice. But anyway, we put that in the chat too.
Wonderful. Yeah, he's fabulous. So I'm looking at our time. I think I can present another section in about 10-ish minutes, 10, 15, and then we'll take that formal break. So we'll one bit more of content here before we take a real official pause. So let's move into this. I want you to know how our series uses those practices that we just provided an overview for. I want you to know how this series is structured and how everything comes together. We are aligned with those guidance documents in the information we share. It's also important for you to know where the content in our series comes from. So for example, it's not my favorite things to teach in writing personally, a lot of them are, but that is, it is rather based on what the research says is effective. So part of what we want to do is look at that vocabulary piece. We want to talk about process writing and the writing process approach, and reading and writing for comprehension and how those two integrate. And note so far that as I put those on the screen, all are aligned with explicit instruction. We also want to use those reading and writing strategies to support students who struggle. So that's that more intensive support you heard about. Everything right now that lines up on your screen refers to macro level writing practices. These are the bigger units of language and how they come together within the writing instruction. So as you've seen, I've taken a turn from broadly evidence-based practices to now we're getting more specific and we're drilling down into a little bit of writing instruction to get focused. So these are some things that involve that writing piece at a macro level, larger structures. The other thing we have to pay attention to is how we apply foundational skills to writing, use of proficient and efficient transcription skills. So transcription skills are your handwriting, your spelling, and finally using sentences. So writing those sentences and employing accurate fluent syntax use. And on that right-hand side of your screen, those are called microstructures. They deal with the smaller units of language and structuring and structure for writing more broadly. The things that connect both sides are something we'll talk about today, is use of short writing often, not long writing seldom. So when we think about writing, I want to shift away from the mindset that writing requires, full on block out tons of instructional time to be able to do it. Writing can begin with just short writing opportunities. And so that is a connection. And the other is more motivating and collaborative writing and discussion connectors today. So for the purpose of moving forward, I'm going to talk a little bit about those connector pieces, very high level today to get us going. And then look, this is how we'll build the rest of our series. Our second session will focus on the right-hand side of the screen, and we'll talk about those micro level structures when we return at the end of the month. Over on the left-hand side, we'll continue with vocabulary and morphology and using a process writing approach. That will occur in sessions 3 and 5. And then when we shift over to content in the winter, we'll be looking at reading and writing for comprehension and using writing strategies to support struggling learners. So you can see we're trying to build in all those pieces of the practices we talked about. A really key essential piece here is the interrelationship between micro level foundational skills and the macro level processing skills. So take a look on the left-hand side. Micro level skills are how we produce that text, right? We're producing it through our handwriting or keyboarding. We need to get it out through spelling conventions, and we need to put it into a sentence structure that makes sense, right? And also referencing the mechanics of overlaying onto our syntax is how we provide clarity and consistency of our structures. Those sort of the micro skills underpin everything that happens on the right-hand side of the screen. So on the right-hand side, we have how we use vocabulary to express our thinking. We use the writing process to convey our thoughts. So the macro structure connects to these larger processing skills involved in communication and expression. Sentences, I think, are really fascinating because they bridge this structure. Sentences at one level are micro, right? Because we're figuring out how to put words together and what the type of words contribute, what's their job in a sentence to have meaning there. We want to figure out that microstructure, but at the same time, a sentence in and of itself is a story. Right? A sentence in itself has meaning. And so when those sentences bridge to the macro structure, we really start to put together what writing is about. So sentences are really essential and important. So understanding there that the microstructure underlies the macro structure, sentences connect. This is just another visual to see that relationship. And to demonstrate this relationship further, I would love to do a writing activity with you. For those of you who've heard me train before, you know what's coming. For those of you who haven't, please be open to this experience and give some writing this morning a try. What I'd like you to do is do a writing activity where you're writing by pen or pencil on paper. Anything convenient to you in your workspace today will work for this activity. So this is the point in time where I want you to find that paper and pen or pencil. What I want you to do is get ready for some reflection. Optimally, I'd pair you up in small groups or with a partner to discuss in a group context the topic that we'll be discussing, but I'll model that for you. Or I might jump over and see if a couple of you are willing to chat with me live on mute. So if you're a brave soul or two out there, get ready to discuss with me live. That'll be helpful. So we have a topic, and this is what your writing topic will be about. I want you to tell me about your favorite vacation spot. And this could be a destination like you've taken and you absolutely loved, and it was a magical, amazing place that you went and you enjoyed your time off from work and your immersion in this new environment. That fits. Other things fit too. So I think about how if I need a brain break or just some space, I'll go out to my back garden and just relax and be in that space. And I love that. And so for me, that would be could be a favorite vacation spot that I like to write about it. The way that I wanted to do this here is, first we'll discuss it. I'm going to jump off my slide view and come over and chat with one or two of you live about your vacation spots. I want to hear what you're thinking, and I'll tell you more about what I'm thinking. Then we'll stop that conversation. We'll all individually have a few minutes to plan. You may write your plan on your paper. You may write some vocabulary words you want to use in your essay. You may draw and sketch out a beginning, middle, and end, but that planning time is for you to get your thoughts in order and be able to write down some ideas for your essay. List making also works if I just want to brainstorm what I want to include. Your plan is up to you. The third step is write. So I'll cut you off. I'll say stop planning and write. I'll give you the prompt to write, and you'll write for 3 minutes. And then we'll come back and we'll share what we wrote, and we'll talk about the experience. So let me work through that process with you right now. One of the things I want to do is have a discussion. So I would do this in the classroom in small groups and partners and in groups of 3. I want you and a couple of you, please do it with me. So I'll start. When I'm thinking about my favorite vacation spot, I really do think about my back garden. I have this garden in the back of my house. I live here in Alexandria, Virginia, and I have this tiny little townhouse property and a little bit of space in the back that I've really filled with favorite plants and perennials. I'm not a vegetable gardener by any stretch, but I can do work with plants and flowers. So I love this space, and it's one of my most treasured retreats. So I can think about the scents and the colors and whatnot, and that's probably what I'll write about. Can I get someone else who just would verbally out loud share with me what you're thinking you might write about too, just like I did? You can come off mute and give it a try, and I really would appreciate someone has guts, courage to do that with me. Come on, just share what you're thinking about. Do I have anybody here?
I can talk.
Yay, thank you. Thank you.
I plan to write about like the Netherlands. I think what appeals to me most is that like nobody can get a hold of me over there. So like the lack of communication with anyone, or the like lack of obligation, and you're just like surrounded by canals. So it feels like I'm sort of like trapped in this space where I can find a sense of peace. So that's what I'll be writing about.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's beautiful. And what a beautiful place to truly escape and disconnect. Love it. One more, please. You can do it. Thank you.
Okay, is that me?
Yes,
I'll do it. Okay, my favorite vacation place is Martha's Vineyard, because it's a family spot, a spot where we've spent generations. So my vacation, though I haven't been there for 11 years, because we tend to go, as kids are a certain age, when kids are younger, and then we kind of wait for the next round of them. I look forward to the days when we can take another family photo sitting on the porch of one of the houses we rent, and it's definitely a place that I connect with different time periods in my life. So looking forward to writing about it.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And it will be a wonderful essay. So I would love you now to go back, all of you. Thank you both for sharing, and to do some planning. So right now, just for a minute or two, and I'm going to keep time, just put on your paper, just your plan, some of the notes that you want to remember to write about, words you might want to use. Brainstorming or list making is good here. So I'll be quiet and let you plan. All right, now I'd like to have you shift over to writing. And so I'm going to start a 3-minute timer, and you can begin writing. But before you begin, listen carefully. Please switch your pen or pencil to your non-dominant hand. So if you're a righty, go over to your left for this simulation. And if you're a lefty, go over to your right. Put your pen or pencil in your right hand. So please write with your non-dominant hand. That's key to this simulation. And you may begin. Writing with your non-dominant hand. Yeah, do your best. Okay, I am going to stop you there. We're going to call time. I'm going to come over so I can see you and talk to you. Yeah, so I did a switch up for that simulation and had you write with your non-dominant hand. I would like you to come off mic and talk to me about that experience. And my heart, I'm sorry, my heart breaks a little for those who had these beautiful essays in mind. It does, like the Martha's Vineyard and Amsterdam. I would really love to know what you could fully write if you hadn't switched to your non-dominant hand for those. But what was your experience of writing with your non-dominant hand? Let's talk about it. And you can come off mute and we'll just work it out in terms of who can share. What were your observations about what happened to your writing?
I think I stopped thinking about writing and was more concentrating on my hand movement.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. Yes, thank you. And for those of you who are listening, you're welcome to put your reflections in chat simultaneously. I'd love to have another person or two speak out through the microphone and share. Others you can just put into chat. What else happened?
I know for me, I was choosing words that were easier to write.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. So I heard from Rebecca, choosing words that were easier to write. So in my case, instead of writing hydrangea, I might write blue flower or purple, instead of writing an advanced vocabulary word. Look at what's coming up in chat. Absolutely, this is real. You had to focus so much on the production of text that you lost the access to your content, right? You're so focused on trying to write that you really couldn't write what you had planned. So I wanted you to work through the steps of this process because this is what your students or our students experience when they struggle with writing, right? They have these really fabulous ideas, like we talked about, my beautiful garden, a trip to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, going to Martha's Vineyard, right? These really amazing things we wanted to share, and we could talk about it. But when it came to switching over to that writing piece and trying to use our pen or pencil to get out those thoughts, it was difficult. And it's what our students experience. It's the frustration that students experience. And my heart really broke when I heard the great topics you shared with me, because I wanted to hear those essays. And I know that that it is it is an obstacle to be able to get those thoughts out. Thank you so much for all your comments here. This is helpful. So let me just bring it back to make a full point, full circle. And so with this writing simulation, what I wanted to get at was the importance, that integration of the foundational skills like the micro and the higher order skills really is essential. So when we have to focus solely on the micro skills like you did in this activity, we don't have the attentional capacity to access our higher level skills for writing, right? And so both are really critical. And so one of the things I want you to hold on to for writing is that we have to teach students these fluent transcription skills, ways to be able to get their thoughts onto paper or onto computer, right, through keyboarding, if that was our mechanism to do so. So difficulty with foundational skills really undermines that writing process. So we want to think about how critical those micro skills are. So I'm going to leave you with this, the writing rope. So the writing rope is just like the reading rope you've heard about, where we're looking at how to thread together the transcription and the sentence work with those accessing those higher order skills. It's really key. And not that I wanted you to suffer or feel frustrated through that activity. I really wanted you to be able to understand how your students feel when they don't have fluent micro skills and what the implications are. So leaving this section today, as we move deeper into writing, I've showed you how we're going to integrate those evidence-based practices into our series, how it's founded, right, centered on the use of both micro and macro skills in writing, and really don't take for granted those micro skills and the implication difficulty with those skills can have for your kids and the frustration that it can have for those kids. So we're going to stop here. It's 10:20 on my clock. So why don't we go to 10:35? You get your full 15-minute there, and we'll start promptly at 10:35. I'll pick things back up. I'll look through the chat to see if I missed any questions while you're on break, and we'll convene then. So enjoy your step away, and I'll see you back here shortly. Thanks, everybody. 10:35. Morning together. I want to review and get us back to focus on what we're trying to cover today. So we started with an introduction to the series. We put that in the context of multi-tiered systems of support and talked about the essentials for core English language arts instruction at the secondary level. Then I introduced evidence-based practices. What are the effective practices for instruction at the secondary level in the areas of reading and writing? And I shared 4 different guidance documents I want you to be aware of, and asked you to sort of target one for this coming academic year as your North Star, if you will, to follow the series. Indicating that we're going to be a little bit more writing forward. We'll have a writing emphasis. I then shifted into that focus and talked to you about the critical things related to writing, which are understanding that writing is composed of these macro skills and micro skills, and the interrelationship between them is very important. Micro skills will always underline those macro skills, like the reading rope I showed you. And we did that simulation for the purpose to put you in your student's shoes, to sort of put you in that place where you felt like you might be a student who was struggling with micro skills and what that would be like. And that experience is something I just want you to hold on to, particularly as we enter additional sessions, if you're continuing on with us as we move forward. So now I want to move into a different section of the presentation, focused on scheduling writing and how to start to do some short writing often. We're going to conclude with 3 different topics. I'm going to do them as like mini modules, about 20-ish minutes each, approximately, depending on the nature of our discussion and questions you might have. And those 3 topics are scheduling, where we're headed next. The second is showing you the scope and sequence that I want you to be aware of. And the third is ending with a few notes. They're really thought points on motivation for students when it comes to writing instruction. So those are the 3 touch points. And then I'll end our morning. I'm already in the afternoon. I'll end our morning with some next steps you can take if you're following the series. So let's head into the slides again. And I will want to talk to you a little bit about scheduling writing. So we schedule writing because it's important. That's the bottom line. We've got to schedule what's important in our routines. And so this is your opportunity to play with the Annotate feature again, to use the text this time specifically. And on my writing wall here, I want you to respond to this question: why is writing so important? Selecting the Annotate feature, then selecting the text function, and you're welcome to put thoughts here on this wall, why writing is important. If it's easier for you, please just respond in the chat. That works too. You can respond, why is writing so important? Yeah, you're getting it. I know, it's kind of, yep. You got it. And please keep the chat. I'll stop my wall and look over at chat too. But yeah, oh, I love what you're saying. It is, writing is thinking. It's how we communicate, express ourselves. It teaches thinking. I love that writing is learning. Absolutely, is one and the same. It really is profound. It's really profound. It's your reflection, so it has a strong metacognitive component. Writing is processing and thinking, and this is so awesome. I kind of like when everything starts to overlap. It just means we're all in this great synergy of thought here in writing. So it's kind of double layered in meaning, but I can certainly read through things as they are coming up. Awesome. Writing is this communication. It's the way we share ourselves with our world. It's our self-expression. Writing is learning. We have to be able to express ourselves. So writing is a way to do that. Thank you. This is it. You got it. We're on the same page. Fabulous. So I'll give you a second or two to post if you'd like. I'm going to say stop with posting. I love the couple that are coming up late. Here's some students are more comfortable sharing via writing than speaking aloud. Yeah. Yep. Great. So we're going to stop here. I'm going to clear the screen and stop. And I want to just stop and check over here and see if there's anything. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Great things in the chat as well. A lot of it is this expression, right? How we're sharing and connecting to the world through ideas and our communication. Good. Well, I have a video I would like to play for you. It's short, it's fun. It answers this question, why is writing important? I'm really fond of this video because it illustrates some nuances to why writing is important in the 20th century. Why is writing important now? It really, which answers a question I had seen in the chat a little bit back ago, and I knew I would show this, and it does shed light on how we are still using writing to communicate. It's short, so let's take a look at that, and you can connect to it in terms of what you were sharing. So remember, we're talking about scheduling, but we schedule things that are important, otherwise they don't happen. So here is this video.
You've got to be able to write and read really well.
Well, writing is communication. It's how you talk. It's how you talk to people. It's how you communicate.
I think students need to be able to write in some capacity in whatever profession or academic program they go into.
I constantly talk to my students about, when you guys are going to be in high school and college, you guys are going to have to write big papers.
I think it's important to have correct spelling and correct language in there as well.
So right at the outset, writing is really important.
The thing that is pretty constant and incessant is email.
Everyone is communicating via email, so you need to at least be able to know how to write an email.
What are the do's and the do-nots in this MTSS class? Do not talk.
Well, I use writing in two different ways. The first way is obviously I have to make sure that my students are proficient in their writing and they're prepared for 5th grade. And the other way that I use writing in my classroom obviously is communicating with families and the parents within the school and the classroom.
I write requirements documents, which have to be very clear, very concise, and very specific. Otherwise, they can be interpreted the wrong way.
I notice your blood pressure's been a lot better too since they changed your medicines.
Yeah.
I use writing just about every day, every hour. I'd have to chart in patients' progress notes, their outcomes for the program or how they're progressing through the program. I also have to write sometimes professional letters to their employer as to why they have to attend cardiac rehab or why it's important. Also for insurance purposes or for case management notes within the hospital itself. So writing is really an important part of my work as well.
Communication is a big thing in our field, and I'm always using writing in my work in terms of email, in terms of proposal writing, in terms of project plans. Writing plays a big factor into what we do day to day, regardless of position.
We use writing to do contracts, for leases, for warranties, for applying for jobs. So we use it in a lot of different areas.
Hey Angie, I'm gonna boost that Facebook post again too and see what happens. We have grants that are needed to be written all the time, and that's done collectively with a staff of about 5 or 6 people in particular who write that. I know our funders are screening grants, and they typically, whenever they get the chance, remind us, if you have typos, misspellings, we don't think you're professional. Why would we want to give you $5,000, let alone $20,000 to $50,000 if you can't communicate in writing?
Guests, customers, they come back if they feel like they belong. And DO classes, I'm teaching that class from my phone. That's pretty much what I'm doing. Okay? And they have to be able to communicate properly, and the best way to do that is all by writing. There is no verbal communication in a distance learning class. There is none. So that's why it's so important for them to actually write properly.
I feel like it's really important for instructors of any course really at CNM to emphasize communication, whether it's verbal or written, and really help our students succeed.
Before you even get into a college or a university, they're going to see you on paper first, and so it's really important that you learn how to write. Especially for educators coming in, you want to be able to teach your students the proper way, and you want to be able to communicate to them how important it is when they move on to high school and hopefully college for one day.
A lot of students, they have no idea how to do a resume because most of them, they just get out of high school, you see. And a resume will make or break you actually getting a job interview. So if you don't know how to, again, critical thinking now, critical thinking. If you know how to write it properly, it'll increase your chances of getting that job. So that's why it's so important for us to actually make sure that they do have good writing skills.
I have actually used, as part of an interview process, I've asked people to write a paragraph, just like something about themselves or some past experience. And I want to make sure that they can write on the fly and write clearly and concisely in a way that's understandable. It's that important to the job, even in a technical field, because people have to be able to communicate.
At one of our meetings, we talked about other people who have applied for positions in our hospital, or particularly in our departments. And it was interesting that a lot of those resumes or applications, folks did not spell correctly, or they're not completed sentences. So it really did not look very well, and a lot of those applications and resumes were, declined right away, because you're already looking at that as a professional person who may have to be writing in their job, for example. And we just decided that was not, just didn't go well. And that's a red flag right away.
If something were not written well, if requirements were misunderstood and the product was built the wrong way, we would not be able to deliver to the customer, and that would be a loss of millions of dollars to the labs.
Reading is really important because you can't fix something if you don't understand it, and every car has different systems on it. Some cars carry as high as 40 computers. That's 40 different systems. So you really can't just remember them all. You just have to be able to go access them, read about them, and understand them.
We've had positions who are on overnight staff, the way they communicate to the morning staff is through a written log and report. So that log is vital for us. If there's ever any legal issue, those documents get subpoenaed. And if the writing's not clear or the intent of what was being written is unclear to somebody from the outside, we may know what we're saying, but the shorthand doesn't translate. And so we have had staff not gain a promotion in position because they're not able to do that component of the job.
You may be a very smart person, but just because of how you came across in your writing can definitely give that perception. And that is something that's hard to overcome when someone feels that, that you are incompetent.
The fact that I write well, I think, gets you some attention. People come to you if they need something written, and that can get you notice, and I think it definitely facilitates movement, particularly into kind of a management role. You know, if you've got two people and their skill sets are relatively equal on the technical side, the person who is able to communicate better is going to be the one that advances.
Kids do not like to write, but I think after being in my classroom and doing it daily, it really helps to just, they can see how powerful it can be.
It's very important. I can't stress that, and that's why I'm here today, because I think it's so important. It's a reflection of who you are and what you represent. You know, I'm representing this hospital, my work, so I think it's really important.
All right, so there you go. I love this little thing. I think it's great. And I love how it starts with a text exchange and they're writing about not writing. I think it's great. Yes, texting is a different form of writing, but it's still written communication. And so I think this little video here kind of gets at it, that maybe even more so now, today, currently, 2021, as we move to 2022, writing is everywhere in ways that we may not really conceptualize and consider. Writing is integrated and instrumental in our society in the way that we communicate. And so we've got to think about it and need to schedule it. If it's important, we schedule it. And so let me come back to that little bit over here in my PowerPoint, and we'll talk about what does that mean at the secondary level. I just want to show you in the slides, I found this thing on YouTube, looking around for things that might have relevance, and it is something, I don't know, maybe even would resonate with students. So the web link is there, and you can find it. Just a few more things to underscore how important it is, what we are doing together. Are these research validated ideas about why writing is important. The research says that by using writing, we can improve student reading outcomes. So programs that have, yes, strong reading, but integrated writing are even better. And our research shows that. We also see that when students are trying to learn more foundational skills, instead of just having them do it through reading, if we have them write and spell, for example, that makes those foundational reading skills more concrete. So writing is key there, evidence-based. As you all pointed out, writing is thinking. Writing is the highest form of comprehension, and it promotes analytical thought. So if we want to grow thinkers, critical thinkers in our society, we have to have writing, so evidence-based. Writing is actually good for both mental and physical health. So there's research, for example, in the area of pain management that shows that when individuals who experience real high levels of pain are taught journaling as a way to interact and to reflect on a pain-based experience, their pain levels decrease. That's just one small example from the literature on the mental health and emotional side of things. Writing plays a role there. Writing plays a role in therapy. Writing plays a role in helping interact with those difficult emotional experiences. So I'm saying that if you're working with students who are coming from challenging backgrounds and dealing with difficult behaviors, instead of pulling writing out because it's difficult, put writing in because it actually is extremely helpful to supporting those students. So I just want you to have a few moments here, just a minute or two, why writing is so important. And with that, we've got to schedule it. So I want you to think a little bit about how much time you currently spend on writing instruction. What does your curriculum look like? When do you explicitly teach it? That means as a teacher, I get up and I model writing instruction for my students and I show them how it works. When do students practice writing? That means you've done your teaching, but they've got to apply it and write themselves. And then thinking about, particularly if you're a leader, how is writing integrated across the curriculum? So what's happening in our science classrooms and social studies and ELA? What's happening in art class? Where and how is writing integrated? Just hold on to those thoughts while I present a few ideas. So one of the things I want you to be aware of is that we are, in a sense, I think I'm close to calling it a crisis, but a writing crisis where students today are really struggling. The first note, the first bullet here on the screen, one out of every three 4th and 8th graders, and 1 out of 4 12th graders is a proficient writer. 1 out of 4 12th graders is a proficient writer. You see the NAEP cited there for the statistics. This has continued. Even the recent NAEP report has shown this trend. So it's a concern. We see in other data that 40%, for example, of high school graduates lack literacy skills that are required for employment. So something's going on with writing, and we need to figure it out. One of the things, as we do figure it out, that's important to say is that writing isn't the flip side of reading. That means I can't just replace one with the other and think it's going to work, as you all know, right? So we can't improve writing simply by combining it with reading and think that we've done a good job. We've got to get kids to experience and receive the instruction in both reading and writing, because that influences the writing development and vice versa. Stay with this a bit here. So if writing is important, we have to schedule it. So students in grades 4 through 12 should optimally spend at least 1 hour engaged in writing specific instruction and practice each day. 1 hour of writing, but what does that mean? So don't panic at the 1 hour. I want to talk about what that 1 hour means a day. It means that the 1 hour includes the teacher instruction, the explicit instruction is part of that. It includes the student practice of writing. It also includes writing occurring in ELA plus writing in science plus social studies. So you look at the scope of the day. So when you look at that, broadly speaking, that's where we think about that hour. That hour recommendation is distributed across classes. It's writing specific instruction and writing practice in terms of an optimal time. I share this as an example of a schedule at the secondary level. Gary Troy, a leading researcher we'll talk about during our series, has done direct work in classrooms on writing instruction. And this was a sample schedule he has shared in his work. So this would be an example of a schedule for writing within a classroom where classroom starts with the writer's warm-up or fluency, which I'll show you what that means in a minute. What does that mean? It takes 3 to 10 minutes. Some kind of writing lesson, so that's your teacher-directed part on what you're instructing. And notice that's not long. It's 15 to 20 minutes. We're checking in with students individually or in small groups. This is the transition time, those check into independent writing, where students write individually, right, practicing what was taught in the writing lesson. And then that's the opportunity in this particular example for that teacher to check in with those students and rotate around, check in for a virtuals, check in with your breakout groups. If we're in class, it's floating around to check with your small groups. And then at the end of the lesson, there's some sharing. Just an example of how something might be structured at the secondary level. When you're thinking about scheduling, you're covering these 3 main points. I want to know when that explicit instruction occurs. So when is the direct teaching of writing? When's the practice piece? That's your independent applied practice when students are writing themselves. And then how writing will be integrated across the curriculum. These are the 3 components as you think about your schedule you want to process a bit. Important here. When we talk about writing instruction, it's a continuous process, right? It's continuous, it's a process, it's ongoing. It's not fast food or achievement centered, which is a real tricky balance because writing in its essence is a little bit different than other subject areas or things that we look at from the curriculum. Writing is so ongoing. We have to grow it over time, and it's a process. Because of that, if you look at the literature and what the guidance was for that hour, that got to get at least an hour, and I say minimal, and William Van Cleve was certainly say at a minimum an hour a day. That's got to be daily. It's daily. And why daily? Because writing is a process. We've got to engage in that process over time. So when we have struggling writers, kids who are really reluctant, it's often because they aren't doing it in a continuous way. They'll come in and we'll do a writing class, or we'll do a writing class, and then we'll move on to other things and come back to writing again. If I'm doing something that might be difficult for a shorter amount of time every day, it builds up my writing stamina, and I'm more likely to engage in that writing process if it's ongoing, little bit every day. So just for a minute, sit with this. Think about how you're scheduling. What are you currently doing for writing instruction? And my add-on here is there something you can do to increase how much time you're spending on writing in your schedule? Does your schedule include the following? Are you denoting the time to teach it as well as practice it and the integration? And then your answer to these questions will lead you into, I know it's a complex, sort of messy picture related to scheduling, but this sets you up for that kind of conversation you'll need to have with your teams. So I'm going to pause here and check in to see if there are any questions on scheduling. And thanks for concurring too. The voice of, yeah, absolutely, it's integrated and across the schedule and not just in one place. So to us, as most of you are here as teams, it speaks to the importance of, as a team, knowing what's happening for writing in those different domains and subject areas. And if you can't, in this case, demand it to be cross-curricular, you got to take control of it where you can, and that's in what you're teaching. So do in the best capacity you can. So let me jump back over here and do a little bit on daily writing with you. So what I want to show you next is the simplicity, in a way, of getting some writing going. We want writing to happen every day for kids, every day in some capacity. And Anita Archer, who's a great educator and instructor in our field, absolutely brilliant with explicit instruction and instructional design. She says, short writing often, not long writing seldom. And let's just talk about one way of helping think about getting some dedicated time to writing each day. I'm doing this in the introduction because I think it's something you can start before we come back and talk about micro instruction at the end of the month. Experiment with how you can get your students to write more. Short writing often, not long writing seldom. And so I'm returning to this activity again, and I want to do it right this time. I want you to write about that favorite vacation spot, but this time you can keyboard it if you'd like, you can write it and handwrite it, and you can write with your dominant hand. I'm not going to change it for you. So return to that essay. We discussed, and I modeled that discussion about how I was thinking about my back garden, my little spot for, a break and escape. We talked to one of our other colleagues today about her escape to Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and what a beautiful opportunity that is to feel disconnected, but yet very much connected in that beautiful city. And then the Martha's Vineyard conversation really showed what meaning a place to return to again and again as a family has resonance over time, right? As a historical resonance, and a place where you can just go back to, and it has so much meaning. So that's our discussion. You've done your plan already from before, so pull that out again, review your plan right now. And a couple minutes, and then I'm going to get you to really write for real. Hopefully you all with me. I'm going to prompt you to start writing right now, your favorite vacation spot. Begin.
Yeah.
So I would love you, I get a brave soul, to share what you've written today. But first, before we do that, I want you to review what you just wrote and underline a sentence that you really like in your writing. Go find that neat sentence that you really like that captures the essence of what you just wrote, or you just like it because it's a good sentence. And once you've done that, please put it in the chat box. Send us those great sentences. Thanks, everybody. And it's going to spark me. I wish I could collect all these and read them, but Frank says I am in control. Great. Other good sentences here coming. And as you are typing in your sentences, do we have anybody on today who might be willing to read? Go off mute and just read together. Or you'll be reading, we'll be listening, but it doesn't even have to be your whole essay. Just a part of it would be fabulous.
I can do it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Sure. Okay.
Yep.
As soon as I cross the Dorset Avenue drawbridge, the stress evaporates. I am in my happy place, my family shore house in Ventnor, New Jersey. This one house holds so many things I hold dear. Time with family and friends, memories of many special weekends, the feeling of peace, and the beauty of the space to the left. In quotes, space to the left, because we always go up to the beach and to the left.
I love it.
It's never to the right.
I love that. Absolutely beautiful. Don't you feel like you just want to sit with this all day? I like personally to hear your words and think about these special retreats. And that's absolutely beautiful about going to the shore and what it means to your family and what it feels like to get there and go left. Thank you all. I love this. Keep viewing what's coming in on the screen here. I wanted to stop and share this to show you we're not doing writing instruction right now, and I want to be very clear about this. But what I want to get started at the beginning of the year is to get your students to write more, write every day. And this short little routine that we just did is a way to begin. It's this daily writing. It's to discuss it, and that could be in the little groups, small groups, to give some planning time. Doesn't matter how you define that. You can define it the way that works for your students, to have the short writing time and then sharing, which can be like this: share a sentence, share an excerpt, someone out loud. And that's the way. Then we'll move into whatever comes next in our day. We literally took 5 minutes. I'm not kidding. I wanted to make sure we got a time for you. Took 5 minutes to do this activity here. Where does this go though with your students? One is you can always mine your daily writing for ideas for future writing projects. So what I might write in a journal or in my daily write could become a draft or ideas, a place to go for writing overall. It's a great way just to build writing stamina if I'm writing every day. And so you can connect it to instructional purpose. I just want to show you, it's just a way to get our students to start more with writing. So coming back over to this PowerPoint, this daily writing could be, looking on the right with me here, 3 to 10 minutes at max. It could be skill-based. So for example, instead of having you write about your vacation spot, I might have you warm up with write some ideas related to a topic we're going to be talking about in our text-based discussion. So just write related to that. It could be a skill-based warm-up, meaning I want you to write the vocabulary, some vocabulary words that you are going to use in your writing today when we talk about the Civil War. Take 2 minutes and write some words that you think might come up. These, you call them whatever you want, doesn't matter. Daily writes, free writing, journaling, it's all there. Note that if you carve this time out instructionally, it is there for you on an ongoing basis if you want to administer a CBM writing assessment. So I'm now only talking about if you do this in an ongoing way and you find that instructional time, now I've got a way already in my schedule to be able to have everybody write to a prompt, a time prompt for your assessment. You can write at any level. For students who are struggling, you could do keyboarding versus handwriting. I could have students write vocabulary words or 3 great words. I could have them write a sentence only during that time, or just free write like you all did if you're more advanced. So you can tailor this daily writing to the level of your students. The importance is it's short and structured, based on student need. And your purpose here is for fluency building and stamina. By doing it every day in little bits, I'm going to build up my student stamina and eventually idea generation. If you're collecting this writing, you're able to use it for future work. So just a few notes. So I want you just to have a moment to think about how you can incorporate the short writing often idea into your instruction. One idea is through daily writes, like we just demonstrated and discussed. And other ideas could be your own about how you want to do more short writing often. Really brainstorm all the different ways that you can add more writing into your world. And so I'm going to stop this and ask you to share those ideas in the text box today. How can you increase writing just off the bat this academic year? What are some things that you can do to get students to write more? And I'll answer that question about grading in a second. Yeah, but your ideas, how can you do more? Where can you find, where can you tuck in writing? How can you, instead of having students read a response, are there places in your day where you can have them write instead? So while you're responding, I want to talk about the grading piece. That's a frequent question. So And there's no right answer, to be honest. That has to align with your structure and how you are organizing content related to grading. It also relates to student motivation and willingness to complete as well, right? If something is graded or given a weight. So I think that balance, I'm not giving you an answer you'd like firm in the line answer, but that answer really relies on how you're going to approach that. So in some ways you could grade based on sample. So we're rotating through all students across the course of a month and everybody will get a graded sample. You could ask students to pick things that they like to submit out of their journal, which allows them to go back and reflect on their work and put forward writing samples for you to look at. There are lots of different ways to do it. Other ways is to make it connected to other things. So if you're really doing stamina building an idea, this is for the purpose of idea writing, connect it to something that becomes graded, that is more formal. So this is your warm up. It's an activity you do, but the end result is for you to pick an idea out of this journal and then work that idea. And that might be the graded piece. I think it is important for us as educators to be aware of what our students are writing. There's responsibility there. So making sure that we're monitoring and looking at what comes up, regardless of how you've structured the grade piece. But thank you. You've got it. You got it. I just want you to walk out of today feeling that you do something more with writing. And if you haven't done any kind of daily writing, I'm encouraging you to put that in and experiment with it and see if you can get it going. So that's one part to think about today, is how writing is scheduled, how you can just increase what students are doing with writing just a bit more, get them to write more. The second thing here is knowing that we do have a solid writing scope and sequence that you can use as a guidance, another guidance tool to use today. So my question to you just to think about is, are you currently following a scope and sequence for writing instruction in some manner? If so, does that scope and sequence align with your curriculum, apply to instruction within grades and across grades and across subjects, and align with assessment? So those are just some thought points as I continue to present. So one of the things we want you to be aware of is a tool that you can use to plan writing instruction and really look to see where the priorities should be in terms of student skill development. So this tool is called the MTSS Writing Scope and Sequence, and you can find it on Livebinder. I'll pull up a couple files and you can see what it looks like. There are different versions. There's an all-inclusive version, it's the version MTSS Writing Scope and Sequence. And if you pull open that one, you'll see that the grades go across the top, right? Do you see how K1, 2, 3, 4 goes across the top of the screen like that? And then on the left-hand column, so I'll draw. So here's the grades moving across the top like that. And then over here, quality of writing, the different components of the scope and sequence are on the left. The scope and sequence describes the skills and content to be mastered at the end of a specified period, and it shows the order in skill progression. So we have things coded as beginning, that's when skills are introduced. Developing is when they're reinforced, when you're continually teaching those skills, and then secure is when they're mastered. I should note that a lot of work went into developing the scope and sequence from our committee, from the MTSS writing committee at Patton when we started this work, as Jen said, about 6 so years ago. William Van Cleve was a dedicated contributor to the scope and sequence, getting a tool that was accurate, aligned with the Pennsylvania standards and align with where skill development is in writing. So let me just stop my share for a minute and pull up just so you can see if it's easier for me to pull up documents than for you to find them as I present. So I want to pull up one of the examples of the scope and sequence. It looks like this, right? This is the version I showed you on my screen with a screenshot. It is the K-12 writing scope and sequence. You can see on the far right, you can K through 12 goes across the top, and then beginning developing secured skills. The scope and sequence is divided into two components. Micro skills, and I'm looking at micro skills right now, so I see the conventions through here, parts of speech use, and this is sentence writing and syntax here, all the way down through. And the second part of the writing scope and sequence deals with macro level skills. Those are your quality features of writing, and that's here on the bottom. I'm going to stop this share and show you another version of the scope and sequence. It's just formatted differently for your, for convenience. So this version, if you pull it up, it's called all-inclusive. All-inclusive is organized by grade, and with the beginning, developing and secured skills listed in this column to the right, and it allows for your own notes, which is really helpful for planning if you're digging in to things. So I want you to know this is here and that it's a powerful thing for instruction. So the question is, and let me bring up an example to answer it. Why are some in yellow and some in white? These are the, it's basically to categorize. The yellow and white is to categorize. So the orange are it's a hierarchy. The color coding is a hierarchy. So the orange are the major organizational categories. Then in the yellow, you have your subheaders, and then the white are the fine details under some of those subheaders that require it. So it's just helping to navigate the hierarchy within that. Good question. So no is there. I'm going to go back over to the PowerPoint a little bit here to tell you more about it. So aligned, as I said, with the Pennsylvania core standards, micro and macro skills are covered. And if you are in the process of doing solid curriculum work, it might serve as a foundation or support for that work that you're doing. Overall, its use, if you have disalignment in your curriculum around writing instruction, this is a great tool to use to bridge those conversations. Because I think these happen quite frequently, right? You'll have one teacher, say a 5th grade, who thought 6th grade taught something, and over on the 6th grade side, you'll have those teachers thinking it was taught in 5th grade. This is just a great way to solidify those conversations. One of the things I want to note is another resource, and I'm going to pull it up here by sharing my screen. If this is something that you think will be helpful to you, there is a writing scope and sequence action plan. It's a Word document that's shared as part of the resources on Livebinder. I'm sharing it right now on my screen. It basically takes you through guiding questions around curriculum, instruction, and assessment. And these questions can help prompt conversations your team might have related to alignment and whether these things are in place. So this is a tool that you can use to develop an action plan around areas of need related to your scope and sequence and curriculum. So leaders, pay attention to this. If this is helpful, this might drive some conversations within your teams that can help provide some additional focus as you move forward. So overall, that's it. I wanted to do a show and tell so you could see that this tool is available. I think extremely helpful here related to processing this information. So just for a minute, I'm going to pause a couple seconds and let you pull up that scope and sequence, take another look while I'm quiet for a minute or two, and just review how you might want to use that moving forward. So I'm going to pause. And as you look at it in these couple of minutes, if you have any questions, just let me know. Yeah, any questions? Really, really helpful tool. And our team worked tirelessly to get that in place. I'm often asked, because I've shared this writing tool before, the scope and sequence, I often ask, do you have something for reading just like it? And my answer is not really. I mean, there are lots of scope and sequence for writing, but to have something like this for writing in the level of detail it is and specification, it's a great, another guidance document for your day. All right.
There is a question as to where the action plan is.
Should be posted in the same set of materials for today. Is it under, sometimes things get under Santoro. It might be under that.
I'll have a look.
Right?
Thank you.
Yeah. Great, everybody. So let me come back to the PowerPoint. Let's shift to that last section of our day. And I just want to leave with you, because we're starting the beginning of this year. We have to talk a little bit about motivation here, just a short bit. And so in the last few minutes, we'll do so. I want you to think about, right? We're going to continue to talk about how challenging writing is, but the motivation piece for students to engage in something that's difficult for them, or they may not be as good at, is really something to consider up front. So I want you to think about that. How are you going to support student motivation? What ways can you support students to see themselves as writers? So motivation, as you know, is attitude. It's my attitude about something. I'm motivated to engage in something when I have a certain mindset, a positive mindset, and attitude to interact with it. So motivation connects to my sense of competence, the belief that I can be a good writer. That's key. And it's also associated with the meaningfulness of the activities in which students engage. So there's two parts. Sense of competence, I believe in myself. So that means as a teacher, I need to think of ways to empower my students to believe that they can be good writers. And the second is to really look at how my writing activities, the topics I present to students, are those meaningful? Do they resonate with kids? Will they engage in that? So you can make this prediction. A lot of work in writing has looked at self-efficacy. It's interesting, this piece of the social-emotional component here to writing, but self-efficacy is the belief in your capabilities to achieve a goal or outcome. And so in writing instruction, we've researched this. And I want you to make a prediction right now, just to yourselves in your head. What do you think the research says about student self-efficacy in writing instruction? Do you think it says that if I feel more confident in my abilities, I'll have greater writing outcomes? Or do you think they're not related? I've already queued you up. So here, yes. I want you to think that, yes, the research is supporting this relationship, and that the degree to which students think of themselves as able and to perform writing tasks definitely contributes to their performance. So part of what I want to say is help your students believe that they can do it, and they will become more competent writers, along with all this other instruction and evidence-based practice we're talking about. Just so you know, this is a helpful thing to look at. In your Livebinder, there are some student writing surveys. These come out of the research that Graham, who you heard speak today, has used to investigate writing self-efficacy and attitudes about writing with students. We can use these surveys. You can take them and embed them into your work. I think they're fascinating. They might be great examples of something you could use this year as a pre and post assessment with your students or a handful of students. So start this year and find out how students feel about themselves as writers. Are they motivated as writers? Then hopefully we'll support you in your instruction this year. Fingers crossed that attitudes change, self-efficacy improves. They're there for you if you're interested. So as we conclude, 3 things I want you to know about promoting growth proof-based mindset, helping students believe that they can be writers, and motivation. 3 things that you can do out the door today. One is to get students to talk with each other and talk with you in a positive way about their writing. The second is to goal set. And the third is to really reflect on choice and challenge. I just have a few, notes to think about there. So when I think about positive self-talk, it means articulating out loud verbally things like this. I want to know my purpose for writing. So what's your purpose for writing today? What's your purpose for writing that vacation daily write? I want to be able to articulate out loud the steps I'm going to take to move through the process of writing. I want to be able to say things out loud that celebrate that I completed something. So like, hooray, I'm done. I'm getting better at this. So how do you use these self-statements in your classroom? You could do something like this. Just a tiny little chart that students fill out. So today, for example, when you came into the Zoom setting, I could have started the day as the session as, please write in a positive intention for your writing today. Type it into the chat box. Or I want you to remind yourself of something encouraging while you work with me today. Type that into the chat box. So it's a way to get students to articulate, and whether virtual or in classroom, the ideas and positions they take as writers. Absolutely, I want to hear positive vocabulary in your classroom. So words like awesome, wonderful, outstanding, fantastic, excellent, yay, wow, great job. I want to hear those positive statements. And not only are you using them instructionally, I want students to use them too. So it is the reminder, how many times are my students actually using these words to say something about what they just accomplished? So reflect on that, and these are simple integrations. The other is just practicing the self-talk. So before we start a lesson, a writing lesson, say something positive that you want to accomplish today. I want to, write 2 great sentences about my vacation. And then at the end of the lesson, do something similar. That's positive self-talk. So with goal setting, and I saw that several of you had checked that this might have been an area where you wanted to consider further, learn more about. Today, at a minimum, I want to tell you that the goal setting we want students to focus on are tiny things. Goal setting is not this big, encumbrant, heavy process. I want students just to think of one tiny thing today. So for example, for vacation essay, I'm going to write an essay that makes it feel like I'm on a trip, makes it feel, or makes the reader feel like they are escaping somewhere different. I'm going to write a paper that challenges the reader's opinion if you're writing an argumentative essay. So something short intentionally that helps focus that writing for kids. Here's a bunch of examples you can return back to. I want you to see that goals are not big things. We want to keep goals manageable and right at the level that is meaningful for a student. So scan this list. I'll read a few off. Write a paper that will be fun to read. Write a story that has all the basic parts. If I'm working with students who just struggle on length, I might say, write a paper that is, and you can insert whatever would help push them just up a little bit. Or you wrote 120 words in your essay last time. This time, write 125. Write a sentence, look at vocabulary, write a story that contains 15 describing words. Maybe that's too ambitious, maybe it's 5. So this is the goal setting I'm talking about, little things that help kids connect with their work. Finally, just a few notes of consideration, and this is more big idea level, sort of ending just with some contemplation. One of the things that students struggle with is they don't want to engage in writing because it's boring, it's not fun. It's not interesting, it's laborious, it's not exciting. And so one of the things I think we try really hard as educators to do is then go look for great, interesting texts, and we try to find interesting topics to write about. All of that is great stuff. I want you to think about the second bullet. Do that great stuff. Go find those texts that motivate kids and find interesting things to write about. But I also want you to challenge yourself to make writing interesting. Make writing and the writing process interesting for kids and exciting. And that little video I think that I shared about why writing is so important kind of gets at that. Writing's fascinating. Make it fascinating, get excited about it, make writing interesting as a way to draw kids into something that can be more motivating. My final note here is to think about challenge, and that challenge is not the same as complexity. It's important. So think about how you might structure some challenging tasks that right at that kid level that takes them up a level in terms of engaging their work, that presents some kind of difficult aspect to challenge them, but it also stimulates them to engage in it. Just think of yourselves. Sometimes I get more spirited and I engage more when I just have that tiny bit more challenge to grapple with. So a multi-component writing project, for example, but with some really exciting things that get kids engaged. Different ways that this balance might work is getting kids to work and play with existing texts where you're rewriting the ending, for example, or changing a character. A great way if you're integrating reading and writing would be to stop that Stephen King novel before it ends, get everybody to write their ending to that, then come back to read the book. Autobiographies, gosh, right up the alley, and commonly used with our adolescent writers, because autobiographies is all about yourself. You're at an age where you're exploring yourself and who you are and what you, how you connect with the world, and doing an autobiography, breaking it up into chapters across the year or across a semester is good. As an example. So I want you to think a little bit about how you might combine and integrate these ideas. Before I end today, I want to share this conversation with Erin Gruel, who is spot on in her ability to think about motivation, student motivation in really challenging circumstances, for her to build a high challenge task for her kids. She talks about how she used Anne Frank, the diary of Anne Frank, for her secondary high school students, and how they were also writing diaries and journals as they read Anne Frank. Her story is really, I think, profound. And if you haven't heard of her or know of the Freedom Writers, if we're talking about writing, check it out. So let me get that queued up here, and we'll play this just at the end. And then I'll give you some takeaways to end. And I know we're heading for an 11:45 end, so I'm aware of our time, and we'll play the video accordingly. So let me get it queued up. So I'm going to play a bit of it and then skip it to the end so you can hear the full story. Oops, sorry, I didn't share it right, I don't think. Stop share, share again.
I think the profound poet G talked about change. And our story is really about change, about an ordinary teacher who had an extraordinary experience with 150 students who hated reading, students who hated writing, and most importantly, they hated me, this perky, annoying teacher wearing polka dots and pearls who walked into their class and wanted to give them a voice. And they looked at me and they sized me up with my white polka dots and my white pearls and this perceived white privilege, and they were miserable. And they made it their sole mission to make me as miserable as they were. Because when they sized me up and down, they thought there's no way in the world that this woman from Newport Beach can understand in the pit of her stomach what it feels like to be hungry. She probably has 500 pairs of shoes. She probably drives a brand new car. She obviously doesn't come from where we come from. And my student stereotypes obviously don't take into account that teachers don't make any money. But to their credit, I decided that I wanted to give my students an opportunity. And in walked on that very first day, that fateful day, a young girl. And she was not carrying a shiny red apple like my father had predicted before I made that 45-minute commute to school. Instead, at the age of 14, a 9th grader, she walked into my classroom with an ankle monitor around her leg and a probation officer. I looked at her sitting in the back of my classroom, throwing up her gang signs, carving her initials on a desk, and I realized that this young girl had never read a book from cover to cover, nor did she intend to. And so when I decided that I would give my students a voice, specifically her, and gave her a journal, I remember picking up the journal after that first writing assignment. And she simply wrote, "I hate Erin Gruwell, I hate Erin Gruwell, and if I wasn't on probation, I would probably shank her." Well, I grew up in suburbia. I didn't even know what shanking was. I just knew it wasn't good.
So I'm going to scan forward in the video and look for a place where the story picks up and talks about her student, Maria.
World of change, possibility, and promise. I think they got swept up in that moment, not realizing that there was this academic component attached to it, which was, okay, now you have to read these books. And I think Maria, of all students, she was furious because I think she felt I had tricked her, that she was very excited about changing. She just didn't want to read a book to have to prove to me that she could change. She became the benchmark for reading this book because she truly did not want to read it. In her mind, Anne Frank was not Latina, Anne Frank did not come from the hood, Anne Frank did not speak Spanish, Anne Frank didn't live in Long Beach.
I took the book and I went home and I was still on house arrest, so it's not like I could go do other things. There's a picture in the front that looked all of, 12. I looked at that picture and there was nothing that I could relate to. But with nothing else to do, I opened this stupid book because in the back of my mind, I thought that I was going to prove Ms. Grohl wrong.
She would come back every day and she would ask questions about Anne, kind of in juxtaposition to her gangster mentality. And, if Maria was in a gang, then Anne Frank had to have a posse. I revere my father, and Anne Frank reveres her father, and sometimes my mom drives me crazy, and so does Anne Frank's mom. So every day was this kind of ping pong, and based on her questions, and how they all had this kind of like gangster twist on it, I realized that she's actually reading.
And so the story goes that Maria really becomes connected to Anne, and had never realized that she died at the end of the story and what that meant.
She had to make it. She was going to make it because why else would we be reading this book? And she's going to make it because she's a good person and she hasn't done anything wrong.
Maria came in one day, stormed in, and threw the book across the classroom and said, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I was kind of taken aback, and I said, "Tell you what?" And she said, "Why didn't you tell me that Anne dies?"
At the very end, when she doesn't make it, I felt that disappointment that I felt every other time in my life when I really believed in something. It was that same feeling of going to the window and waiting, hoping that my father was going to come home, and he didn't. Every feeling of disappointment all of a sudden came crashing together at that moment because I so desperately wanted her to make it. Because if she didn't make it, then what were the chances of somebody like me that was a bad person actually making it out?
I felt horrible. I felt horrible because I just assumed that maybe she had known. that I just assumed that everyone knew that Anne Frank was this iconic figure of this tragedy. And the fact that Maria didn't know, it was devastating to her, and thus became devastating to me, because I never wanted to take away my students' hope. And then something serendipitous happened. Darius stood up and he said, "She did make it. She did make it, Maria, because she wrote about it." And then he went on to say, "How many of our friends have died and we've never even read an obituary?"
And so I will stop sharing. And so they wrote about it, right? So that I want to end there. Motivating, it's telling, when we write, we tell our story. Linking back to what you all pointed out earlier, writing is communicating. And so in this case, where'd you latch and hook that motivation for writing? Connecting with those students so those stories can be told. She lives today because she wrote about it, and those kids got that. And so I want to leave you there with a message on motivation. I'm just excited to partner with you on this series and take you through our journey. Here's our roadmap. As I shared with you earlier, our roadmap will revisit each session. And for those of you who are really serious about implementation, these are your implementation next steps. I want to conclude, because I know we have these trainings and you all leave and think, well, what do I do with all that? And this is what to do. Look at the guidance documents we talked about at the beginning. Think about more writing. Scheduling is a real key piece there. Review your core with the writing scope and sequence. And then finally, if there's some strategies I just snuck in at the end here related to motivation and those resonate with you, connect those to your work. So I'm excited to move forward. We'll be meeting at the end of October for micro level writing, and I took us just a time. So thanks, everybody. I look forward to seeing you all soon.
Laina, thank you so much for such an engaging and helpful session. We have so much to explore, and with all the resources you shared and the information. As a former secondary ELA teacher myself, you know, I always appreciate your sessions and how much I look forward to seeing you every time you are with us here at Patton. We are honored and always amazed at what you bring us. If you have any questions, please reach out to your IU consultants or Patton consultants at your regional offices if you need anything from us. For participants, the next session will be on October 26th from 8:30 to 11:30. We look forward to learning more from Laina that day and seeing you back for more discussion around supporting secondary ELA. These are, again, open to the masses. So if there's anyone else you would like to share this with, please feel free to do so. The video of this session will be uploaded to the Livebinder once we are ready to go, once it is ready to go and made accessible. The exit survey is in the slide and is on the slide and in the chat. If you are interested for credit today, please make sure that you are completing this survey by midnight tonight. Once again, please join me and the rest of the Patton MTSS team in thanking Dr. Santoro this morning. We are grateful to have been able to host you, and we look forward to seeing you again. Those of us at Patton will hang around on the Zoom for a few minutes if you have any questions. I am happy to facilitate a walkthrough of the Livebinder in a few minutes. We want to make sure that everybody who needs to go or has to leave and wants to get the sign-in can get that. But I will go ahead in about 5 minutes and share my screen and walk you through the Livebinder if you have any questions. But thank you so much for your attention and dedication to supporting all learners and students in Pennsylvania through your continued efforts in secondary ELA. Have a wonderful remainder of your week.
Lisa, would you mind just playing the MTSS, the conference video? It's in the chat, the links. People could maybe just, it's short, and just while they're signing off, they can listen to it or whatever. Thank you.
I'm looking for it though. There we go.
I can share. Oh, you got it? I can share
no.
the screen.
If you've got it, that's great, Karen. Thank you.
Okay.
And the link to the forms in the chat.